Hello, my name is Yang-May Ooi. I'm the author of Bound Feet Blues. This is the book Bound Feet Blues. And I'm very excited because I took delivery of this book last night and I unboxed a whole load of author's copies, all 12 of them, there is a video online. In this series of videos that I'm now going to make, this one being the first one, I'm going to talk about some of the things that are in the book, some of the stories that are in the book, and also my creative and writing process. So in the other video, I was talking about the fact that it took me 5 months to write this book, and that was actually half days on Fridays, half days on Saturdays, a few evenings in the week. And I totted them all up, and actually that came to 28 days. So I wrote this book, all 404 pages of it, in 28 days. So I want to explore in this video, how is it that I could write such a big book in such a short time? And you have to remember first that it was over 5 months, so it wasn't, back to back, but actually 28 days is pretty quick, I guess, and 5 months is pretty quick. So how did I do it? Well, in reality, if you think about it, this is a memoir, it's a personal memoir, and it's a family memoir. So you might say that actually it was a lifetime in the making, my lifetime, and it was generations in the making, generations of women and men in my family, because those are their stories that are in this book. And I had always wanted to write my family story, ever since I was 13, living in Malaysia as a child, having this aspiration to be a writer. And I tried to write the story of my great-great-grandfather who came to Malaya, as it then was, from China when I was 13. And then over the years, as I matured and grew up in my 20s and 30s, I came back to my family stories time and again and tried to write these stories. But I kept getting stuck because I felt that I had to write a very weighty, serious, historical narrative with dates and research and interviews with all kinds of people, just like all those kinds of memoirs and biographies that you see out there. But it was only when I was 48, not very long ago, 4 years ago, when I realised, you know what, these stories were passed on to me by my mum, by my grandmother, by my grandfather, as oral stories. As kids, we would sit round in Malaysia with my grandparents in their house, on the veranda in the afternoons. And I can still hear the cicadas humming outside, smell the frangipani of the flowers from the trees outside. And we'd sit round and Grandma or Grandpa would tell a story about their own lives as, for my grandma, a young girl in China, from my grandpa, his ancestors, his father and his grandfather, and these were oral stories. And also my mum, we lived in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and in the evenings we would run into my parents' bedroom after dinner, all having had our shower, all clean and squeaky clean. We'd jump on the bed and we'd say, "Mum, tell us a story." And she'd tell stories about how she and Dad met, and their time as students in London, and her childhood and so on. And all these were told to me as oral stories. And so, no wonder I was getting stuck trying to write a book, because they needed to be told as oral stories. So, 2 years ago, when I was 50, in 2014, I created this show. It was a one-woman show, and it was a storytelling, but I call it a story performance, because it's storytelling but with performance elements. And so this is the show, Bound Feet Blues, a life told in shoes. And over the last couple of years, we've been developing this one-woman show, and I'm working with the director, Jessica Higgs, and a producer, Eldarin Yong, and an amazingly talented creative team to create a one-woman show on the London stage. And so this show is going to be at the Tristan Bates Theatre on the 24th of November, and it will run to the 12th of December. And that's just a one-woman show, that's just me on the stage retelling the stories that my mum and the women in my family told to me. And it really is framed around my great-grandmother here, who had bound feet, and she was born in China in the late 1800s, and she escaped an unhappy marriage to come to Malaya which as it then was now Malaysia. And the fact that she had bound feet really, really fascinated me. And so in the show, I reenact her story, my own story, my mum telling us about how she met Dad. And so in this one-woman show, there's a whole cast of characters from my family. So what has that got to do with the book? Okay, so this show is an hour long. It's on the page, it's 25 pages. So I couldn't fit in all the stories that I wanted to tell, but I chose the ones that would work on stage. So in the book, Bound Feet Blues, there are the stories behind the story. All the stories that I couldn't fit into the show are in the book, including the ones that are already in the show. And so each chapter begins with a couple of scenes from the show, and then in the book, the subsequent chapters then expand on those scenes to give you more depth, more background, more discussion, more discovery of all those stories that were actually behind the 1 hour show. So here is Bound Feet Blues, the show, and here is Bound Feet Blues, the book. And so really, to come back full circle to the beginning, I wrote this book in 28 days. The physical writing of the book was really easy because the thinking had gone into it in terms of preparing for the show and writing the script. And also I got the structure, because one of the problems I had in terms of writing the traditional memoir was that I was stuck in that traditional mindset. But doing the show liberated me. And so this book is not a conventional memoir. It's not told in a linear way. It doesn't really have any dates. Because what I'm interested in is the mythic elements of the stories that are told and passed down through generations in the family. It's not the actual factual elements that are interesting, but it's the oral retelling. So what it meant for my grandpa to tell stories about his grandfather, what it meant about the meaning of the stories about my great-grandma with bound feet. What did that mean to me? What does that mean to my family? And so this story in the book is told through layers and layers of storytelling, my personal story, grandma's stories, great-grandma's stories, and also fairy tales. And legends, myths and legends. I talk about the legend of the Pontianak, which is a folk story in Malaya. And so when you read this book, you're going to get a sense of me as your narrator, as your storyteller, sitting with you and telling you these stories. And it works in the way that memory or storytelling works, that as you've listened and watched this video, I've rambled along, gone along in different routes, but actually I keep coming back to the theme, which is how did I write this book? And so you get a sense without necessarily having a very fixed, rigid, linear structure. And in the sort of more fluid storytelling structure works really well in this book. And so I was able to write it in a very fast time and in a very confident way over 5 months, 28 days, because I'd already done that work and I suddenly found this new structure that worked for me as a writer. So, if you want to buy the book, Bound Feet Blues, go to the publisher's website and the short code is bit.ly, bit.ly/BFB book. And if you want to come to see the show, Bound Feet Blues, at the Tristan Bates Theatre in central London, here we are, here's the flyer. It's on from the 24th of November 2015 to the 12th of December, and there's a short code to the ticketing page, and that's bit.ly again, bit.ly/BFB tickets. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to see you at the show. If you buy the book before the show and you come along and come and find me in the bar, I would be very, very happy to sign it for you.